Think that I left my job before I got my visa appointment. Does that look like, oh, why did he leave the job even though he didn't have a visa yet? How do I convince this gap of 2 years where I didn't like really have a full time position?
That phrase is a red flag. That and telling the consular officer that you genuinely want to return to your home country.
There's often this rumor that you need to show 1.5 times the I-20 amount as your fund. So, is that true? Should I mention the amount in local currency because visa officer might not know rupees and USD? What do you think?
And if you're leading with your doubts, that's all the consular officer can see.
Hi guys, if you're new to my channel, my name is Yudi. I was an international student just like you and now a senior product manager in tech for more than 8 years. The goal of this channel is to inspire and educate students and professionals to have a successful career in America. And for that, the first step is to crack that daunting F1 visa. So I partnered with Yvette, who was a visa consulate officer in Mumbai and Delhi, and we did a masterclass a couple weeks ago and it was hugely successful. In that webinar, we got a lot of questions, so we decided like, how about we film this Q&A for these common questions so we can share with all the people. So hopefully you enjoy these questions in the video. Addition to that, because the masterclass was super successful, we decided to build a course so that you can watch it anytime you want to. And along with that, we are also actually giving 4 different guides and bonus materials, which is amazing. We're also building a cool community where all the F1 visa applicants can talk to one another. So if you're interested, check out the link in the description. I'll only say this one last thing, that we have an early bird pricing going on. So for the first 50 students, it's going to be massively discounted. So please grab it before we raise the price. I would highly recommend. Check out link in the description. And now I'll let you enjoy the video. Thank you, Yvette, for doing this. I know these are some of the common questions these were asked to us like in our last webinar, and I'm excited for our coming webinars as well, but we thought it's a good idea to combine this and provide this might apply to many other students as well. So but before we get started, and people who might not know you, do you want to do like a quick intro?
Hey guys, my name is Yvette Bunsell. I'm a former consular officer. I worked with the State Department in Embassy New Delhi and Consulate General Mumbai from 2018 to 2022. And then I started this company called Udeti, which in Sanskrit means rise up and overcome, to help visa applicants prepare for their visa interviews because I saw a lot of mistakes at the visa window. So here we are.
Yeah. And you not rejected, adjudicated
Hmm.
40,000 visa cases, which is approved
Hmm.
and denied also. That's cool. Cool. Okay. Now let's get into the questions of. Okay. So the first question is, how do I address drastically changing my field? For example, like if I did bachelor's in hospitality and now I'm going into data science field or analytics, like how do if visa officers ask me, what do I say?
So your question is, if you drastically change your field, say you have a bachelor's degree in hospitality and now you're going for a certificate in analytics. In that example, there's a couple things that I see. One is that you're going for a certificate in analytics and not a master's degree in analytics. So
Hmm.
you want to be able to explain not only why you're changing your field, but also why you're just going for a certificate program.
Mm,
So did you take a course after hospitality? Did you work in the analytics field? What prompted the shift from hospitality into analytics? If it's just you realize that maybe hospitality wasn't for you because you worked in the hospitality sector, that may not be enough because you need to
mm.
be able to explain why analytics. How can you go from hospitality to analytics? Did you do some freelance work? Something
Yeah,
has
like
to create that bridge. Mhm.
yeah, for example, like if I was working in hospitality in a department, I don't know, like thinking of an example, where I had to deal with like asset management or something like some software, and realize that they like how the dashboard works and the data works, and as that is what sparked my interest, that this is cool and I want to learn how to do this so I can create dashboards and provide that. Could be like a segue, but again, obviously don't copy paste my answer. But
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great answer. So another example is if you were in the medical field and then you were going for analytics and you wanted to create dashboards and you connect it back to the medical field. In this scenario, it makes perfect sense because you're
Mm,
not ditching your previous field, you're adding to it. So this is one,
mm,
that is a perfect example, Yudi, of how you can bridge that gap for it to make
mm.
sense. And there's multiple other ways to do it, but that was a really good example.
Right. Okay, cool. Let's do the next one, which is will it be an issue if my sponsors fund are in accounts that are not directly in their name? For example, if the funds that are supposed to be used for my education is in my mother's name or my grandmother's name, is this positive or negative if my sponsor is also a government employee?
Okay, so I'll answer for government employee or private sector. That tends to be more positive, especially government
Mm,
employees, because your parents would then eventually be getting a pension, even though it's not directly your ties. Government employees, civil servants generally have a good reputation of stability and ties to their country in general. So that
mm,
is generally looked at as a good thing. Again, this is an opinion of um, me as a consular officer. Other consular officers may think differently in terms of fields, but the other question is if your accounts are in different funds. So I would make it as simple as possible at the visa interview and just say my family funds or the savings for my education is X amount. But in terms of your paperwork, have your mother's, grandmother's, father's funds, paper clipped together and be willing to explain further if more documentation or further questioning happens, but I wouldn't
mm.
necessarily go and say, let me explain how everything is divvied up into
Yeah,
accounts. You
yeah, yeah,
simply
yeah.
don't have time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just generalize it, my family versus like, yes, the primary sponsor is my dad, but the funds is coming from my mom. Like don't get into that until like unless they ask for it.
Right. Don't
Yeah.
confuse them.
Right. Cool. Okay. Next one is should I mention my internship on my DS 160 even if I'm currently working for the same company?
Why not? If you have your current company as your current
Mm,
employer and the internship with different duties and a different title as your past employer, it looks like you have some career progression. So why not?
mm. Nice. I love it. Next one is I think this is like very common and also a lot of myths around this. What is the best opening punchline for a visa officer? Like, I went to the window. Should I be like, good afternoon, ma'am, good morning, ma'am, or sir? Like, how you doing? Or like how's it going? Like, what should be the opening punchline? Is there a one?
I wouldn't say, ma'am. I wouldn't open up like that. I would walk up to the visa window with confidence. I would put the
Mm,
I-20 inside the passport and wait for that first question. And the opening pitch that's the best is one that displays a strength of yours and
mm,
communicates something that is strong and impressive, something personal, something clear. Any of those things or a combination of them is going to make that perfect pitch. Not a
mm,
one word answer, not something rehearsed and generic, but something
mm.
but something meaty and interesting. I don't know.
Mm. I love it. I love it. Okay, cool. Another one is it's also like little similar. I also did the same thing that I left my job before I got my like visa appointment. So does that look like, oh, why did he leave the job even though he didn't have a visa yet? And I'm quitting before I want to go to United States, but I don't have a visa approval.
That the consular officer is human. And if you tell them, I was working for three
Mm,
years, I knew I wanted to pursue my master's. And before doing so, I needed a break, needed to enjoy myself, recuperate, apply for different universities, recalibrate, is a great answer if that is your truth. So you see a lot of students either resign or not resign, neither of which is a red flag. It's about how you explain your
mm,
circumstances that's going to matter more.
mm. Nice. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking like if I was asked because I did the same thing, I would have said similar. Like I just needed a break and I needed to spend time before I
Mhm.
like fly. So and
Yeah.
enjoy India, eat some food. But
Right.
okay, cool. So next one is like again, this is probably very similar for a lot of people. Like I have my brother, sister, family member working in United States. Let's say like a close blood relation in United States under OPT
Mhm.
or H1B. How is this going to impact my visa interview, like my F1 visa interview, and how do I prove like my home ties to visa officer?
So those are two different questions, but for the first questions, it really depends on the relation and what they're doing in the United States. Specifically, if you have a sibling that's on OPT, it means that they've used their visa well, and it also means they're no longer paying tuition. So, in general, that should not
Mm,
be a negative for you. It may not be a positive, it may not be a negative, it's a neutral point. Again, it goes back to you and how you are proving your student intent, but don't worry about having a sibling on OPT in the US.
mm.
It's a neutral point in my opinion. Um,
Well, so that's for OPT and H1B, but like
mhm.
I'm already thinking people are gonna ask follow up in the comments that, but what if they are just doing their masters? They just went like 6 months before,
Mhm.
a year before. So what happens in that scenario?
So, in the scenario where they're paying tuition, you're going to have to discuss how your family and is now going to fund you as well.
Mm,
So that is going to be on the consular officer's mind.
got it. Okay. Another one which was very common is that I had a tourist visa. I visited to United States before. Is that one? The question part one question is that good, bad, negative, positive? And during the port of entry, they asked me certain question. Do I have to stay consistent with that answer now that I'm entering again as an F1 visa?
So always stay consistent when you're giving answers to officials.
Hmm.
And if you have had a B1B, B2 visa and used it well, meaning you said you went for a graduation and ended up going for 2 weeks and coming back, versus you said you wanted to go for a graduation and stayed 4 months. So those two may have different outcomes for you. But in general, if you've had a B1, B2 visa, that is a very positive sign and could actually help your chances of getting an F1 visa because it means you've held a US visa, you use it appropriately. So chances are you'll use your F1 visa appropriately as well.
Mm, okay, nice. Nicely done. Okay, cool. So next one is I finished my bachelor's in engineering or whatsoever field 2 years before I'm flying for now, like in let's say 2022, and now I'm flying for fall 2024. There's 2 years of gap. I did some courses during this time, certification, and maybe got some remote internship. How do I convince this gap of 2 years where I didn't like really have a full time position? Like I had some ad hoc courses and internships, but not really like a full time work experience.
So the question is gaps. Right. So if you have taken internships and you've taken some coursework, you can always list those internships on your DS 160 and discuss the coursework as well as the internships during your visa interview. Bonus points if you can connect those internships or courseworks to your field of study, to your master's
Mm,
degree, to your
mm,
future plans as something that you were either preparing for your master's degree or inspired you to go for a certain thing during your master's program, or maybe something that you had excelled at. So you could always use that.
okay. Yeah. And it's even though like the internship is not for like entire 2 years, like it could be 6 months or 4 months or something like that. And that's like essentially like it did not convert into full time, or it just was like four months and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, now next one is here's another one which is interesting that if I apply to only one universities, I
Hmm.
have done full research. I'm very confident why I only want to go to this university, and I didn't want it this confusion that like multiple admits because I didn't want it to anyway go to them. I only wanted to go to this. I got the admit. And if they ask me why do you only apply to this one university instead of many, like, is this positive, negative? Like, how do I phrase this?
So it's a bit unusual for
Mm,
applicants to just apply to one university. However, if you have a really good reason, there's a particular course you really wanted to take, for example, then you can discuss why that university was really well suited for you. If you have a graduate assistantship, research interest, or have connected with people specifically at that university that you want to discuss, but it can't just be like low level, I talked to somebody. It has to be some sort of legitimate connection where this university is one of the only choices for you, then you can discuss that. So you
mm.
have to be able to
Yeah,
convince
like
the
for
consular officer.
example, like XYZ University. I was thinking of UMBC, but like this university has this research program which I'm really interested in, and no other university provides it, and like that is what my passion is. So, like that kind. I mean, again, like
Right.
you have to like do more elaborate research and explain that, but something like that.
Yeah, it has to
Yeah.
make sense to the consular officer. Otherwise, the consular officer is thinking, can you not afford to apply
Mm,
to more than one university? Do you have a special person in that one school? Is your intent to really be a student if you're putting all your eggs
oh,
in this basket? Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Mm,
So that's kind of because it's unusual, it may prompt some additional questioning. But if you can convince them of why this program and you're really speaking enthusiastically about that program,
mm,
then great. Then maybe applying to that one university will end up helping you because you are being so concise.
mm, mm. Okay. All right. Next one. Okay. Can I mention the merit based scholarship that I've received as in my financial support?
Sure. So if you received a merit-based scholarship, that does count as one of the ways you're paying for your education. It will be noted on your I-20. So if you want to mention it during the interview as a part of your finances, you can go ahead and highlight it. Sure.
Hmm. All right. Now, next one is related to funding, and it's kind of two part. First is there's often this rumor that you need to show 1.5 times the I-20 amount as your fund. So is that true? And then second, like I have my I-20 amount, like I have my personal funds, but they are all invested in the market, stock market or whatever. So is that an issue or not? Like, how do I explain that? Yeah.
So when I was a consular officer, I did not need to see 1.5 amount. I wanted to see that on your I-20 you cleared the amount for 1 year. And then I wanted to ask you how you're going to fund subsequent years. So as long as
Mm,
you showed on your I-20 that you can cover your tuition and living expenses as per the I-20, and you were able to explain through savings, which can be you having investments and other types of liquid savings, family funds, a loan, and you were able
mm,
to explain to me convincingly that you're able to cover the next year or 3 years of your education, that was sufficient. That should generally be sufficient.
got it. Okay. Nice. All right. So the next one is if for some reason I chose a program which is brand new in that university, I really love the program, but does visa officer know that that program is like brand new in that university, and does it impact negatively that it's like this is the first time I'm going to try this program?
Right. So this student is getting a analytics at a degree at Stony Brook, and they
Yeah.
have a new pilot program. And so the visa officer will not know that it's a brand new program. So you don't have to worry about that. You can just talk about Stony Brook. You can talk about the program. You can talk about why you're excited about it. You don't necessarily ever have to mention that it's a pilot program. Well, nor will
Hmm.
they really know. Hmm.
Got it. Okay, nice. Next one is funding related. Yeah, like, is it okay if my sponsor is retired? And second part of this question is like, what if my fund, like, what if I'm funding my education through a loan, but my father is mentioned as the sponsor? Like, I've gotten the loan, but my father
Hmm.
is also the sponsor.
Sure. So if your father is retired, that's perfectly okay. You can mention his pension, you can mention family savings. And if you are using a loan, make sure that you've already taken out that loan. It's not an intention to get a loan, it's a loan that you already have. So when you discuss it with the consular officer, you're able to talk about how you're going to fund your education, both using the funds from your father, the savings, as well as the loan. And it should be that is all okay and very normal and pretty
Hmm.
standard that many students have retired parents and still have them sponsor and support in some way.
Nice. Okay. Cool. All right. Another one is kind of interesting. Should I mention the amount in local currency because visa officer might not know rupees and USD? What do you think?
I would mention your amounts in local currency unless you're going to another country
Hmm.
to take your visa interview in which they don't understand your home country's local currency. But otherwise, yes, please, if you're in India, talk in rupees and crores. They get it.
Rupees and crores. If you are making crores, you're my best friend.
Yes.
All right. Next one is I have applied to not just United States but other countries as well. Should I mention this? And then also, does officers know that I've applied to other countries?
They may not necessarily know that you have applied to other countries. I would say it depends on the country. Sometimes they do know, but long
Hmm.
story short, it's actually a positive, especially if you gained admission into the other universities. And even if you didn't, because you can say, I've considered other universities and I've considered a course in Canada. However, I chose this university because it seems like you're not so locked into the United States, which that's the
Mm,
type of attitude the consular officer wants to see. They don't want you to be over invested in the United States. And so it is a very positive thing if you are willing to go elsewhere. Does that make
yeah,
sense, Yudi?
it does. It does. I was laughing
Yeah.
because, like, in my head, I was thinking, like, it is my American dream. That's why I only apply to USA. But,
Right.
but it's,
That is like that phrase is a red flag. That and telling the consular officer that you genuinely want to return to your home country. Like so using like I
trust me,
honestly
I
want to
do.
come
I
back.
do.
Let,
Yeah.
let's
Right. Yeah. That's cool. Okay. Next one is how this is like again. I think this is very common. How can we justify repaying a large amount of loan, which we will probably taking like 50,000, 100,000, whatever, and if we are not considering OPT, essentially, like if this question comes up, like what's your plans after studies, like how do we
Mhm.
not justify that without mentioning OPT?
So you can't bank on OPT or CPT, and the policies and regulations talk about how OPT and CPT is not to be used as a means of funding your education because those can go away.
Hmm.
So that's why the consular officer does not want you to rely on them or discuss them in terms of loan repayment. You have to have a solid plan B for repaying your education loan beyond OPT in
Mm,
theory. In
mm,
practice, you may be banking on OPT, and hopefully, more than likely, it's going to come to fruition for you. However, that plan B, in case you're asked at the visa window, how are you going to repay that loan, should sound a little bit more like once I get this master's degree, I am going to be making top dollar uh, at
yeah.
my dad's business, multinational corporation, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
So
yeah. 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 Nice. Okay. What's the best way to demonstrate funding sources? Is it personal loan? Is it education loans? Parents sponsoring the loan? U.S. in sibling in United States sponsoring it? Like, what's the best one?
the best one is the one that makes sense based on your family circumstances and
Mm,
situation. So if your family has the funds, your dad has a decent income, then great, please use that. If you need supplemental amount via loan, then take out a loan by all means. If you don't have the reoccurring family funds and you have a sibling in the United States who's making good money, then get a letter from them saying that they're willing to support you. That's better than not having any incoming funds to help support you with the subsequent years. So the best answer is the one that works for you.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's also like that, but then how do you explain that is probably also very important, because you could fumble that answer, and like that can like create a lot of red flags.
You should That's why you should prepare that how you're going to answer that question.
Yeah, yes, yeah, right. Okay, next one is on DS-160, that do I need to mention like exact dates of all my employments and internships, and uh, exact duration? How like closely do I need to align with my real life into DS-160?
I think be consistent. Month to month and year is pretty sufficient. You generally don't see people just putting from 2017 to 2018. They usually put the month and
April
year.
2020.
So
Yeah.
just be consistent in the DS 160 and try to be as close to the dates as possible, because when you're getting asked questions, you don't want to confuse yourself because you don't remember what you put on the DS 160. So it's better just to have it aligned to reality and communicate with the consular officer accordingly.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think the follow up is also like, does Yvette like help in reviewing DS-160 in one-on-one sessions? So do you do that?
Yes, I do. So if you book a consultation with me and you have not submitted your DS 160 yet, you can upload that on my website. I review the DS 160 before our consultation, and I'll tell you some things that I see that are red flags. Maybe your work descriptions are not on par. I had a client say that they were self-employed, but they really had a business. So I
Hmm.
encouraged them to put business and describe it better because it was closer to what they were actually doing. So there's a lot of things on the DS-160 that can be improved. And one
Hmm.
of the biggest things is the reason for rejection. A lot of people make mistakes by typing the wrong thing for the reason for rejection when
Yeah.
they don't really need to go there. So
Right.
yeah.
And follow up is like, let's say they watch this video and they're like, oh no, I need to update my DS-160. Can they do that? And like, can you help with that as well?
I don't personally update DS-160s,
Right.
but I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have
That's
written
right.
a blog about how to do it. And so if you've already submitted it, you may need to create a new DS-160. And then when you go to biometrics, you bring the new DS-160 and the old DS-160, or when you arrive to your
Right.
visa interview, you bring the new and the old DS-160. So you may need to recreate your DS-160. Once you've already submitted it, you can't edit it. That's why I said send it
Yeah,
to me
yeah.
before
Like
you
the
submit it. Yeah.
first
Mhm.
situation, cool. But like if I did it, now I'm like, after watching this, they're like, I think I might have to get it reviewed, and they can come to you. They can say, like, here's what I've submitted, and like I think I can improve, and then they can like do another one with the updated, like you said. But
Mhm.
you are not gonna update it, but they can still get that reviewed if they have concerns about like, I don't know if I did the justification right on my DS-160, essentially.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a way to recreate one. Yes.
Cool. Okay. Um, and by the way, if you do end up like choosing to go one on one and you want some discount, like you can use this code UDJ125, and you can get pretty good discount there. So cool. Okay, next one. Nice. Another one is, I like, there were universities who were waiving off GREs, so I didn't really take one. So should I take one for the visa interview, because it might look nicer that I did take GRE?
So you're very committed to passing your visa interview. It might be better just to prep with me than prep for that GRE course because it sounds like a lot of work. Um, So I think the answer is that while a GRE is certainly impressive, especially if you scored well, if it wasn't required for your program, I think it's a lot to go through just for the visa interview. They may not even ask you about your GRE score. So I would say don't sweat it, don't worry about it. Focus on talking about that university and program in a knowledgeable, clear, and thoughtful way, and you should be okay.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I think we, in one of our videos, we've done now many videos. So one of your videos, we have mentioned that how like if the university vetted you and given you I-20, then you're good, like kind of in a way. So like GR is not necessarily used as an elimination or something. I can't remember what the exact
Yeah.
words were.
Yeah, so the policy for that consular officers should follow is that they shouldn't be re-adjudicating your academic credentials.
Hmm.
Now, there is a caveat for that. They're adjudicating if they think you're going to be successful in case the academic credentials of that university, maybe they have a very high admission rate and a low graduation rate. So in that case, they're not necessarily re-adjudicating your entire academic credentials, meaning they may not be looking at your undergraduate transcript and making sure that do you qualify for this course, but
Hmm.
they're in general adjudicating your caliber in some way in order to assess if you can be successful in your course. That's
Hmm.
one thing they're assessing. Can this person be successful? Yeah.
Got it. Okay. This is another follow-up thing. Does your visa officer have this list in their brain that this university is like gives a lot of admissions and has a low graduation, or this is what they do when they are like, oh, you mentioned Northeastern, let me look up, and the graduation rate is like really low, and is that like again, I don't know what happens behind the window, but is that what you
Right.
do?
Well, there are certain universities that do have a bad reputation, either
Hmm.
because they allow everybody to gain admission. So the consular officer sees people that maybe don't speak English going to that school. And so it
Mm,
starts to get a bad reputation. Or the
mm,
consular officer just knows that school because they've lived in the US their whole life and they know that maybe this school is easier to get into. So as such, they're going to ask more questions of that
mm,
applicant just because it may not be a difficult school to get into. So I want to make sure that this applicant can be successful. I want to know that he's serious. I want to know that
mm,
he's not just trying to get an I-20 to get to the United States. And I think that's fair.
mm.
Whereas, I had an applicant today earlier going to University of Maryland College Park. That is not that easy to get into,
Yeah.
and and Northeastern is not that easy to get into. And so there are certain programs where, yes, in a way where if they get into that program as a consular officer, I know a certain level of
Mm,
academic excellence has been met or a certain GRE score has been met. So I am more comfortable with that applicant because they have already proven themselves. Does that make
right.
sense?
It does. Yes. Yes. Okay. Cool. Another question is, if a visa officer asks, like, why did you not pick this university and you picked this one? How do you typically answer?
So you can talk about something unique about your university that the other university may not have offered. So it's pretty simple. I got into two excellent programs. I've gotten into three excellent programs. However, this university has this particular course in control systems, and I have a history. I studied
I love
self-driving
to start
cars.
talking tech. Like, oh wow, look at that. Okay. Another question is, what if the I-20 length and the course length are different?
So for example, if on your I-20 it says that it's a 3-year program, but it's really a 2-year program,
Yeah.
and well, the first thing I would reach out to my designated school official and I would make sure that it's not a mistake. And if you had time to get a new I-20, you can try to get a new I-20.
Hmm.
So if that's not the case, then you can stick to what the intended length of the program is. So the consular officer might ask, why does it say 3 years? And you can say, my course is 2 years. That's a general code, or that's an error, whatever the answer is. And I have a document from my university explaining how long my program is. So
Hmm.
have some sort of documentation that says that this is a 2-year program.
Hmm.
So you don't want to confuse the consular officer. So if that's happening, you either need to get that I-20 corrected or have documents that says it's two
Hmm.
years.
Got it. Okay. Next one is, how do I discuss going into a master's program that's completely different from my work experience? So if I was working as a software engineer, but I am going for product management course or like engineering management course. So how do I explain that?
So I would say that you need to be able to discuss your history as well as where you're going and what it is along the way that made you shift gears, no pun intended, into that new field. For example, I'll use an easy one. I studied mechanical engineering and I'm getting an MBA in operations. So I can tell the consular officer that with my mechanical engineering degree, I'm going to make an excellent operations manager, and I hope to get
Mm,
a top level position at Amazon in operations or program management.
mm.
And so you can explain how. I mean, I hopefully you don't need to explain too much about the correlation there, but you understand what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying.
Another question is like I've applied to multiple colleges, and when asked like about the universities that I've applied to, should I mention or can I mention all of them? Should I not mention all of them? Like how do I approach that?
Okay, it depends. I'm going to give you two examples. Say
Mm,
you got into four schools, but you're going to your top school, and maybe the other schools were more safe schools. In that case, I would use the strategy of I got into four great universities. I decided to go to Northeastern because of XYZ reason.
mm,
Say the other example is your admissions into four fantastic schools, and you got into, you maybe chose one that was in the middle tier or even the lowest tier because of a very specific reason, or even the highest tier one. And that way you can be strategic and say, I've decided to go to Northeastern, but I've gotten into MIT and Harvard as well. And
mm,
that way you're really impressing the consular officer on the one hand. On the other hand, you're not risking not impressing the consular officer if your other safe schools maybe are not as impressive as the
mm,
one that you got into.
mm.
So a little bit of strategy can be used there.
Nice. Yeah. Another question is, does it really matter where I'm getting the loan from? Like, does it have to be certain banks? Can it be e-commerce banks or whatever? Does it matter?
It depends on the consular officer. Some
Mm,
consular officers may ask you where you're getting your loan from. They may be very particular. Some consular officers may not care at all, just as long as you have a loan
mm,
letter. Some officers may want to see a secured loan versus unsecured. I don't want to see C, but would would prefer to see a secured loan, not that an unsecured loan is anything that is bad. So it depends on the consular officer, but in general, I would say that most consular officers just care about the fact that you have a loan. I think
yeah.
most consular officers are like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nice. Next one is, what should be the length of my answers? Because sometimes people like to like explain and ramble, and they don't know how much to say, how much is enough. So what is like a perfect length? Is there a
I don't
perfect
know.
length?
I don't know if there's a perfect list, maybe just a couple sentences, but make sure that everything you're saying is something that you're
Mm,
proud of and you're leading with your strengths and you're not being humble and you're being strategic. So
mm.
no such thing as a perfect length, but definitely don't go on too long.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Any final words of wisdom? I think that was it. And any other words of wisdom from you?
Good luck, students, this student season. We are really rooting for you. I would say that recently with a lot of my clients, I saw that they're leading with their doubts. They have a lot of
Mm,
positive things about them, but they're just leading with their doubts. They have so many
mm,
doubts in their mind. And if you're leading with your doubts, that's all the consular officer can see. And when you're answering the questions, you're qualifying what you're saying and you are giving this like doubtful aura. So put those doubts in a box and lead with your strengths. So list those strengths so that you give that vibe to the consular officer, and that's all they can see. So I would say that.
nice. I love that. I love that. And also, don't forget, Event and I have a course which you can get it. Link is in the description. Check it out. And you can still get one on one with Yvette if you want to. Again, thank you all. Until our next one. Do you want
Keep
to say?
smiling, keep hustling.